She caught her boyfriend cheating, so she kissed the stranger beside her, a Romanian mobster. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you're watching from, and if this story steals your heart, please hit subscribe. The red dress was an act of defiance, though Ava would not have admitted it to anyone, least of all herself. It clung to her curves like a second skin, a slash of crimson against the twilight canvas of Bucharest. She felt powerful in it. She felt ready. The rooftop bar was their place, hers and Marcus's, a bubble of glass and neon suspended over the city's ancient, chaotic heart. She had news, the kind of news that deserved a celebration, deserved the red dress. She had been promoted, named the youngest senior curator at the Bucharest Museum of National Art, a position she had bled for. She scanned the crowd, the ambient pulse of electronic music thrumming through the soles of her heels, a smile already forming on her lips as she searched for his familiar, handsome face. And then she found him. He was not alone. Marcus was pressed against the glass railing overlooking the city, his hands tangled in the platinum blonde hair of a woman Ava had never seen. And his lips, the lips she had kissed that morning, were on hers. It was not a friendly kiss. It was deep and hungry and possessive. The smile on Ava's face did not so much fall as shatter. The sounds of the bar, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, rushed in and then receded, leaving only a deafening, hollow roar in her ears. She felt the blood drain from her face, her hands, leaving her cold and trembling in her vibrant, defiant dress. She could not breathe. She could not move. She just watched as her entire world, the future she had been so meticulously planning, detonated in front of her. She took a step back, a purely reflexive motion, and her heel caught. She stumbled, not forward but sideways, bumping hard into a solid, unmoving object. It was not an object. It was a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a black suit so perfectly tailored it seemed less like clothing and more like a warning. She looked up, her vision blurred by the tears she refused to let fall, and her breath caught for an entirely different reason. His hair was jet black, slicked back from a face that was all harsh, handsome angles, and his eyes. His eyes were the color of glacial ice, a startling, inhuman blue that seemed to absorb all the light around them. He was not looking at Marcus. He was not looking at the blonde. He was looking at Ava. He had been watching her. He had seen the precise moment her heart had splintered. And in that moment, fueled by a lethal cocktail of champagne, heartbreak, and pure, unadulterated rage, Ava did something she would never be able to explain. She did not cry. She did not scream. She looked at this stranger, this monolith of power and shadow, and she saw an anchor in her storm. Or maybe she saw a bigger storm, a way to blot out the one raging inside her. In a single, impulsive, self-destructive motion, she reached up, her trembling hands fisting the expensive material of his suit lapels. She pulled his head down to hers, rising on her toes, and she kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a scream pressed into his mouth. It was salt and betrayal and a desperate, clawing plea to feel something other than the humiliation of being unwanted. For one frozen heartbeat, the man, Lucian Dragovic, remained perfectly still. He was a statue of cold surprise. Ava's eyes were squeezed shut, but she could feel his stillness, his sudden, coiled tension. She expected to be pushed away, to be thrown to the ground, to be slapped. Instead, a large, warm hand came up, not to strike, but to cup the back of her head. His fingers tangled in her honey blonde hair, gently and then firmly. He did not just accept her kiss, he took it. He angled his head, and his mouth moved against hers, transforming her chaotic, desperate act into something else entirely. It became deep and dark and possessive. He tasted of expensive whiskey and something metallic, like power itself. He was not kissing her back. He was dissecting her, tasting her pain, her fire, her defiance, and finding it interesting. A gasp from across the bar, a man's furious shout broke the spell. "Ava!" She tore her lips from the stranger, her chest heaving, her mouth tingling, her mind a total blank. The bar had gone quiet around them. The music was a distant throb. Marcus was staring at them, his face a mask of purple rage and total disbelief. The blonde woman clung to his arm, her expression of triumph now one of complete confusion. Ava's gaze flew to the stranger. His ice-blue eyes were still on her, unblinking, unreadable. A small, almost imperceptible muscle in his jaw twitched. He was not angry. He was not amused. He was assessing. Marcus stormed over, shoving people out of his way. "Ava, what the hell do you think you're doing? Who the hell is this? He was breathing hard, his handsome face ugly with fury. Ava shrank back, the last of her defiant adrenaline vanishing, leaving her cold and exposed. The stranger's hand, which had been in her hair, moved to the small of her back, a simple, proprietary gesture that burned like a brand through the thin material of her dress. He still had not looked at Marcus. His gaze was locked on Ava, a silent question in their depths. Is this the man? His voice was a low rumble, a deep bass that vibrated through her skin. The accent was thick, Eastern European, Romanian. Ava couldn't form words. Marcus, incensed at being ignored, reached for her. Ava, we are leaving now. His fingers wrapped around her arm, grabbing her, pulling. Before his grip could even tighten, the stranger moved. It was not a fast movement, but it was so economical, so precise. It was over before anyone could blink. His hand shot out and clamped around Marcus's wrist. There was no sound, but Marcus's face went white, his eyes wide with sudden, agonizing pain. He let go of Ava instantly, crying out. The stranger held his wrist for a second longer, his ice-blue eyes finally turning to meet Marcus. The temperature on the rooftop seemed to drop 10 degrees. She is not going with you, Lucian Dragovic stated. It was not a threat. It was a simple, immutable fact. He released Marcus's wrist, and Marcus stumbled back, cradling his hand, his eyes wide with a new, dawning fear. He looked at the stranger, truly looked at him, at the tailored suit, at the gold signet ring on his finger, at the two other large men in dark suits who had suddenly, silently appeared at their shoulders. Marcus was a bully, but he was also a coward. He had just realized he had picked a fight with a lion. Ava, he pleaded, his voice now a whine. Tell me what's going on. But Ava was already turning, her mind finally catching up to the horror of the situation. She had kissed a stranger. She had kissed a dangerous stranger, and he had hurt Marcus. She had to get out. I have to go, she whispered, her voice trembling. She looked at the stranger, at Lucian. I'm sorry, I have to go. She turned and fled, pushing her way through the silent, staring crowd. She expected a hand on her shoulder, his voice commanding her to stop, but nothing. She made it to the elevator, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the button. Just as the doors were sliding shut, a hand appeared, not to stop her, but to press something into her palm. It was him. He stood in the opening, blocking the light. He looked down at her, his face a mask of cold control. He pressed a heavy, black metal card into her hand. His thumb brushed her palm, a spark of ice and fire. When you are done crying over the boy, he murmured, his voice too low for anyone else to hear, you will come and find the man. The elevator doors slid shut, leaving Ava alone, her heart hammering against her ribs, the heavy card in her hand a cold, solid promise of ruin. The next day, Ava's apartment felt less like a sanctuary and more like a beautifully decorated prison. The red dress was in a heap on her bedroom floor, an accusation in silk. Her phone, discarded on the kitchen counter, had been vibrating incessantly since dawn. She didn't need to look. She knew the pattern. The first dozen messages from Marcus had been furious, demanding, who was he? And how could you do this to me? The next dozen had been pleading, I'm sorry, baby, she meant nothing, and please, let's just talk. The final wave, the one that had started an hour ago, was just angry, pathetic noise. Ava ignored it all. Her mind was not on Marcus. Her mind was on ice-blue eyes, a deep Romanian accent, and the terrifying, possessive way he had taken control of her impulsive, stupid kiss. The black card was on her coffee table. It was heavier than it looked, made of matte black metal, with a name embossed in simple, severe gold lettering, Lucian Dragovic. There was no title, no number, no address. Just the name. A name that, when she had finally, trembling, typed it into a search engine in the early hours of the morning, had yielded almost nothing. A few society photos from years ago, a mention of Dragovic holdings in connection to shipping and real estate, and a string of dead links. He was a ghost, a very powerful, very well-dressed ghost. She had tried to throw the card away, but her fingers had refused to let it go. It felt like a weight, a new and terrible responsibility. She forced herself to go to the gallery. Work was her armor. Work was the one thing she could control. She was a senior curator, a woman of taste and intelligence, not the kind of hysterical fool who kissed dangerous strangers in rooftop bars. She tried to lose herself in the provenance of a new collection, but her focus was shattered. She kept feeling eyes on her. She would look up, expecting to see a colleague, but no one would be there. It wasn't until she was leaving for lunch that she saw it. Parked across the street, half in a no-parking zone, was a black Mercedes-Benz, the same model that had flanked Lucian Dragovic at the bar. The windows were tinted so dark they were just black mirrors, reflecting the street. It didn't move. It just sat there, waiting. She ate lunch at her desk. She was too rattled to go back outside. Around 3 in the afternoon, a delivery arrived. It was not the usual inter-office mail. A delivery man, looking nervous, brought in a tall, slender crystal vase. In it was a single rose, but it was not a red rose or a white one. It was black, the petals like rich, dark velvet. Ava's heart stopped. There was a small, heavy card tucked into the leaves. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. The note was handwritten in strong, elegant script. Rasutai si patravest my bine. Red suits you better. He knew her office. He knew her language. He knew she'd worn red. The invisible net was tightening, and she didn't know whether to scream or run. That evening, she practically ran from the gallery to her apartment, ignoring the black car that was still parked, unmoved across the street. She just wanted to lock her door, draw her blinds, and disappear. But he was waiting for her. Marcus. He was slumped against the wall of her apartment building, his suit rumpled, his hair a mess. He looked like he hadn't slept, and his wrist, she saw with a jolt, was wrapped in a blue bandage. Ava, he said, his voice hoarse as he saw her. He pushed off the wall, blocking her path to the door. Ava, thank God, you have to tell me what's going on. Marcus, get out of my way, Ava said, her voice cold. All the pain from the night before had been replaced by a mixture of disgust and a new, sharp fear that had nothing to do with him. We are done. There is nothing to talk about. She tried to push past him, but he grabbed her arm, the same arm. No, you don't get to do this, he snarled, his desperation making him ugly. You don't get to humiliate me with that. That thug and just walk away. Who was he? Do you have any idea what you've done? His fingers dug into her arm, and this time it hurt. Ava cried out, a small sound of pain and fright, and tried to pull away. I believe the lady asked you to move. The voice was not Lucian's. It was deeper, flatter. Ava looked up. The black Mercedes had slid to the curb, silent as a shark. The passenger door was open, and a man was unfolding himself from it. He was a mountain, built of solid muscle and draped in a suit that must have been custom-made to fit his massive shoulders. His head was shaved, and his face was a roadmap of old scars. He just stood there, his hands clasped in front of him, his expression one of polite, lethal boredom. Mr. Dragovic would like to see Miss Ava, the man said, his gaze fixed on Marcus. Marcus froze. He looked at the mountain, at the black car, and his grip on Ava's arm loosened, but he didn't let go. She's not going anywhere with you, he blustered, but his voice trembled. This is a private conversation. The mountain, Mihai sighed, a small, put-upon sound. It was not a request for either of you. He didn't move, didn't threaten. He just waited. And in his stillness, Ava felt a new, more profound terror than Marcus could ever inspire. He was the servant. What was the master? The back door of the Mercedes opened, seemingly by itself. It was an invitation, an order. Ava looked at Marcus, at his pathetic, angry, pleading face. She saw the man who had betrayed her, the man who was now grabbing her, the man who was weak. Then she looked at the clean, dark, plush interior of the car. It was a void. It was an unknown. It was an escape. She made a choice. Let go of me, Marcus, she said, her voice quiet but steady. She yanked her arm free. He was so surprised by her tone that he let her. She didn't look back. She walked the few steps to the car, her head held high, and slid into the back seat. The door closed with a heavy, final thud. Mihai got back in the front, and the car pulled away from the curb, leaving Marcus alone on the sidewalk, his mouth open, his face a mask of utter defeat. The drive was silent. The windows were so tinted she felt like she was in a cocoon moving through the city but not part of it. The car didn't go to the bar. It went to a part of the city she rarely visited, a district of new, gleaming glass towers that shot into the sky. They pulled into a private underground garage and she was led to a private elevator. When the doors opened, they were not in a lobby. They were in his home. The penthouse was breathtaking and cold. It was all white marble, black leather, and vast walls of glass that looked out over the entire city, the Danube a black ribbon far below. It was sterile, masculine, and screamed money and power. Lucian Dragovic was standing by the window, a glass of dark liquid in his hand. He was not in a suit. He was wearing simple black trousers and a black cashmere sweater, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. The casual clothes only made him look more dangerous. His forearms were covered in tattoos, intricate patterns of black ink that snaked up his arms and disappeared under his sleeves, peeking out at his collar to curl around his neck. He turned as she entered. Those ice-blue eyes scanned her, from her professional work clothes to her trembling hands. "You came," he said. It was a statement. "I was brought," she countered, finding a sliver of her old defiance. Smiled. It was not a warm expression. It was the cold, satisfied quirk of a predator. "Details." He gestured to the city sprawling below them. "This is my city, Ava. There is nowhere you can go that I cannot find you. There is no one you can talk to that I do not know. Did you enjoy the rose?" Her blood ran cold. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice shaking. He turned from the window and walked toward her. He was so tall, he seemed to resuck all the air from the massive room. He stopped just in front of her, so close she could smell the whiskey on his breath, and something else, something clean and metallic. "I want to know why," he said, his voice a low growl. "A woman like you, a life like yours, why me?" She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't know," she said, the honest, humiliating truth. "You were there, and you looked like you wouldn't break." He laughed, a short, harsh sound that startled her. "I do not break, fru musetia me, my beauty." He lifted a hand and with one finger traced the line of her jaw. His skin was warm, his touch surprisingly gentle, but it felt like being marked by fire. "I destroy." He let his hand drop. "That boy, Marcus, he is insignificant, but he hurt you. He was disrespectful." "I don't know anything about him," she said weakly. "I know he has a gambling debt of 200,000 euros to the Vladescu family. I know he was skimming from his firm. I know he was trying to use your connections at the museum to find a private buyer for a stolen painting. I know. Everything." Ava felt dizzy. This was so much more than cheating. This was a criminal underworld she knew nothing about. "How?" "Because he owed the Vladescus," Lucian said, his voice laced with a cold disgust. "My rivals, and he was disrespectful to you." He paused. "He was fired this morning. His credit lines are frozen. The Vladescus have been informed that his debt is now my concern. He will not bother you again." She stared at him, horrified. You ruined him." "I saved you," he corrected, his voice soft but firm. "I am Lucian Dragovic. The man you kissed in a room full of my enemies is the head of the Dragovic family. And you, Ava, you announced to that entire room that you are mine." "I am not," she cried, stumbling back. "I want nothing to do with this." "It is too late for that," he said, his voice hardening. "You put your lips on me, you claimed my attention. In my world, that is a binding contract. You are a loose end, Ava, and I do not leave loose ends." He stepped toward her, and she was trapped between him and a marble pillar. "I will not have what is mine be disrespected by him or by anyone." He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "And you, Ava, you are now mine to protect." He stepped back, his face a cold mask. "Mihai will take you home, go to work, live your life, but know that I am watching, and I am waiting." Weeks passed, and the silence from Lucian Dragovic was almost as terrifying as his presence had been. Ava's life, on the surface, returned to normal. Marcus was gone. He had vanished. His apartment was empty, his phone disconnected. It was as if he had been erased from Bucharest, and the void he left behind was cold and sharp. Ava told herself she was relieved. She told herself she was free. She threw herself into her work, the one place she felt sane. The annual Bucharest Art Museum Gala, her biggest project of the year, was a welcome, all-consuming distraction. She worked late, she held meetings, she curated, she planned. She did not look for black Merceds. She did not jump when flowers were delivered. She started to believe, or perhaps forced herself to believe, that she had been a brief, strange diversion for a very dangerous man. A man who had, as he promised, handled her problem and moved on. The night of the gala, Ava felt like her old self again. She was not the girl in the defiant red dress, broken and impulsive. She was the curator, in charge and respected. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, a color that was sophisticated, powerful, and calming. It had a high neck and a low back, a statement of elegance, not desperation. She moved through the grand, marble-floored ballroom, greeting donors, politicians, and artists, a glass of champagne in her hand, her smile genuine. This was her world. She was good at this. She was safe here. Then the energy in the room shifted. It was not a sound, it was a feeling, a sudden collective intake of breath. The chatter died down. The small orchestra seemed to falter for a beat. The museum director, who had been laughing at one of Ava's jokes, suddenly went pale, his smile freezing on his face. "Oh my," he whispered. Ava turned, following his gaze to the grand staircase, and her heart stopped. It was Lucian Dragovic. He was not supposed to be here. Men like him were shadows. They operated from penthouses and back rooms. They did not walk into the brightest spotlight of Bucharest's high society. He was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the black and white a stark, brutalist uniform that made him look less civilized and more like a panther forced into a cage. His jet-black hair was slicked back. His ice-blue eyes scanned the room, dismissive, until they found hers. He was flanked by Mihai, who looked profoundly unhappy to be in a tuxedo, and another guard. They remained at the top of the stairs, but Lucian began to descend. He walked straight to her. He didn't pause to greet the Minister of Culture. He didn't stop to shake the hand of the billionaire banker. He walked past them all as if they were furniture, his eyes locked on Ava. The room was a sea, and he was parting it, a dark, silent force. He stopped directly in front of her. The scent of him, whiskey and cold night air, cut through the cloying perfumes of the ballroom. He said nothing. He simply looked at her, a slow, appreciative gaze that started at her eyes, dropped to her lips, and then traveled the length of the emerald green gown. He lifted her hand, the one not holding the champagne flute, and turned it over. He bent his head and pressed his lips to her knuckles. It was not a chaste, polite kiss. It was a brand. His lips were warm, and she felt the jolt of it all the way to her toes. "Emerald green," he murmured, his voice a low rumble just for her. "I was wrong. This is your color. It matches your eyes when you are." Surprised. Her eyes were hazel, but she knew in the light they would be flecked with green. The museum director, regaining his composure, hurried forward. "Mr. Dragovic, we are so honored. Your donation to the new wing was beyond generous. We had no idea you would be attending." Lucian did not look at him. His eyes were still on Ava. "I was not until an hour ago." He finally turned his head, a slight dismissive motion. "The donation was an impulse." He turned back to Ava and held out his hand. "Dance with me." It was not a request. Ava's hand was in his before she had even processed the command. He led her to the center of the dance floor. The orchestra, taking the cue, began to play a slow, languid waltz. He pulled her against him, one hand on her bare back, his fingers hot against her skin, the other enveloping hers. They were the only couple on the floor. 100 pairs of eyes were on them, 100 whispers starting. "What are you doing here?" Ava hissed, her professionalism warring with a potent mix of fear and a dark, unwelcome thrill. "You are ruining my reputation." "I am making it," he murmured back, his lips brushing her temple as he spun her in a slow circle. "Look at them. They all know who I am. They all see me holding you. They are all wondering how a man like me claimed a woman like you. Let them wonder." "I don't belong to anyone," she protested, but her voice was weak, and she was all too aware of the hard muscle of his chest against hers, the solid strength of his thigh brushing hers as they moved. "Don't you?" he whispered, his mouth moving to her ear. "You haven't thought of me me, not once. You haven't felt my eyes on you, even when I am not there. You haven't. Wondered what would happen if I came back for you." She had, every single day. She had been restless, her sleep troubled. She had felt a strange, profound disappointment every morning she woke up in her own bed, alone. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "You are a queen in your own world, Ava. All these people, they bow to you. I find that very appealing." The dance ended. He did not let her go. He kept his hand on her back, a possessive, guiding heat, and led her from the ballroom onto the wide, moonlit terrace away from the prying eyes. The cool night air was a relief against her flushed skin. "They are less than dogs," he said, gesturing back at the glittering crowd. "They smile and they lie and they trade in whispers, but you are real." He stood in front of her, a black silhouette against the lights of the city. "You scared me," she admitted, the words coming out before she could stop them. "You disappeared, and Marcus, you destroyed him." "Good," Lucian said, his voice soft. "You should be scared, but not of me, Ava, never of me. You should be scared of a world that would let a man like him hurt you. I am the only one who can keep you safe." "Safe from what?" she cried, her composure finally breaking. "You are the danger. Everyone in there is terrified of you." "I am the danger to them," he corrected, stepping closer. "To you, I am a shield. I am the wall the shadows break against." He lifted his hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "He was a boy who cheated. I am a man who protects what is his. I have been patient. I gave you time to see the world without me. Is it better?" "It's quieter," she said. "Is quiet what you want, Ava?" he asked, his voice a gravelly whisper. Or do you want to feel alive? He took her home, not his men, him. He had a low-slung, priceless Aston Martin waiting, and he drove it himself with a controlled, predatory speed through the sleeping streets of Bucharest. He did not speak. The silence in the car was thick, heavy with unspoken questions. He walked her to her apartment door, the same hallway where Marcus had grabbed her. He stood in front of her, the light in the hallway casting shadows across the harsh planes of his face. He was so solid, so real. He was the most dangerous and the most real thing she had ever known. He looked down at her, his ice-blue eyes searching her face. "Tell me to go," he said, his voice so low she barely heard it. "Tell me you want the simple life, the quiet, the empty apartment. Tell me you want a man who will bore you but who will not frighten your friends. Tell me, Ava, and I will walk away. I will erase myself from your life. You will never see me again." He was offering her an out, a last chance. She looked into his eyes. She saw the danger. She saw the blood he was capable of, the shadows he commanded. She saw the ruin he could bring to her carefully curated life. And she knew, with a terrifying, absolute certainty, that she didn't want him to go. A quiet life felt like a death sentence. She was shaking. She couldn't say the words. He waited, his expression unreadable. Finally, she put her hand on his chest. She could feel his heart, a strong, steady beat beneath her palm. "I can't," she whispered. His eyes darkened, a flicker of something, triumph. He didn't move. He waited for her, so she did what she had done on the rooftop. She acted. She reached up, fisted her hand in the lapel of his perfect tuxedo, and pulled him inside her apartment. The door clicked shut behind them, a sound of finality. He pressed her back against it, his mouth coming down on hers, and this time it was not a kiss of anger or impulse. It was a kiss of surrender, a kiss of claiming. And as his hands moved from her back to her hair, she knew she was lost. She was his. Morning light that filtered through Ava's blinds was soft, but the reality it illuminated was sharp and undeniable. She woke tangled in limbs and high thread count sheets, a heavy arm draped possessively over her waist. Lucian was awake. He was on his side, propped up on one elbow, just watching her. His black hair was mussed, falling over his forehead, and without the armor of his suit or the coldness of his penthouse, he looked younger. But his eyes, those ice-blue, ancient eyes, were just as intense. "Good morning, Sorel Mew," he murmured, "my son." The endearment, spoken in his deep, accented growl, sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. The change was profound. There was no going back. He did not leave. He stayed, and her apartment, her quiet sanctuary, was transformed into the temporary nerve center of the Dragovic Empire. He sat at her dining room table, his laptop open, a second encrypted phone pressed to his ear. He spoke in rapid, harsh Romanian, his voice a low, angry buzz. Ava watched, mesmerized, as he commanded and threatened and moved invisible pieces across a chessboard she couldn't see. Then he would hang up, the cold capo would vanish, and he would turn to her, his eyes softening. "Coffee, frumusetti me?" he would ask, as if he hadn't just ordered a man's ruin. The duality was terrifying. It was also the most intoxicating thing she had ever experienced. He took her to his penthouse. This time she did not enter as a curiosity or a captive. She entered as its mistress. The staff, who had been invisible before, now materialized. They bowed their heads. "Domna," they called her, the lady. He showed her his real office, a room behind a biometric scanner lined with screens and maps. "My father built this empire on shipping and steel," he said, his hand resting on the small of her back as they looked out over the city. "My grandfather built it on blood and fear. I am building its legitimacy." He was a chief executive officer, she realized. The chief executive officer of a legal, powerful, and very dangerous corporation. He did not hide her. He did not hide his world from her. That evening he took her to dinner, not to a public, glittering restaurant, but to a private club unmarked in the basement of an ancient building. The air was thick with expensive cigar smoke and the scent of old whiskey. The walls were red velvet, the light was low. The men here were not in tuxedos. They were scarred. They were armed. And when Lucian walked in with Ava on his arm, every single one of them stood. They did not approach. They waited. One by one they came to his table, kissed his signet ring, and nodded respectfully to Ava. Domna! She was a queen, and this was her new, dark court. The lesson came later. One of his captains, a barrel-chested man with a broken nose, gave a report that Lucian clearly did not like. The numbers were wrong. Money was missing. Lucian's demeanor changed in a fraction of a second. The warm, attentive lover vanished. The ice-cold capo sat in his place. "You think I am a fool, Dmitri?" Lucian asked, his voice lethally quiet. The man, Dmitri, started to sweat. "No, capo, Lucian backhanded him. It was not a slap. It was a blow, a strike of brutal, calculated violence. Blood flew. Dmitri staggered but did not fall. Ava gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lucian's voice was a low, deadly hiss, all in Romanian, too fast for her to follow. The man dropped to his knees, his head bowed, begging. Lucian waved a hand, dismissing him. He turned back to Ava, his expression smooth, his hand steady as he picked up his wine glass. "He stole from the family," he said, as if explaining a minor business error. "He stole from us." Ava was speechless. This was the reality. This was the man who had slept in her bed, who called her his son. He was a king, and he ruled with an iron and sometimes bloody fist. The ride back to the penthouse was silent. Ava was processing. She was terrified, but a dark, honest part of her was also thrilled. She had never felt so protected, so seen. But his world had enemies. Mihai, his mountain of a bodyguard, was nervous. "Boss," he said, meeting them in the private garage. "The Vladskis are quiet, too quiet. They did not like you handling Marcus's debt. He was their asset. They see Domna," he gestured to Ava. "They see her as a weakness." Lucian's face hardened. "She is not a weakness. She is my strength, double the guard. She does not leave the penthouse without me or you." Ava bristled. "I am not a prisoner, Lucian." She had her gala follow-up. She had to go to the gallery. "You are not a prisoner," he agreed, his voice tight. "You are precious, and they are animals, but fine. You will go. Mihai will drive. I will be right behind you. You will not be out of my sight." She insisted. It was a matter of pride. She was still Ava the curator. The next day she went to the gallery. The trip was tense. Mihai drove the armored Mercedes. Lucian followed in his Aston Martin, a dark shadow in the rearview mirror. The meeting was quick. She felt foolish. Lucian was right. The world outside felt dangerous. She was leaving the gallery, the sun just beginning to set, casting long purple shadows over the street. Mihai was opening her door, and then chaos. A black van, coming from the wrong way down the one-way street, screeched to a halt, blocking them. A silver BMW slammed into the back of Lucian's car, boxing them in. Doors flew open. Men in black masks carrying guns jumped out. "Stay down!" Mihai roared, shoving Ava back into the armored car. He drew his own weapon and returned fire. Gunfire in the middle of the street. It was deafening, the pop, pop, pop echoing off the buildings. Ava screamed, cowering on the floor of the car. The windows were bulletproof, but the sound was terrifying. Then her door was ripped open. The lock had been broken. A man with a scarred face and dead eyes reached for her. "Come, Domna," he sneered. Mihai was busy fending off two other attackers. He was too far away. Ava screamed again, kicking out. But before the man's hand could touch her, he was gone, a blur of motion. It was Lucian. He had come from his car, which was now smoking. He was not in a suit. He was in his element. He moved with a speed that was inhuman. He didn't just shoot the man. He grabbed the man's gun arm. She heard a sickening snap, and he put his own pistol under the man's chin. A single, muffled shot. The man dropped like a stone. Lucian was covered in the man's blood. He looked at Ava, his chest heaving, his eyes not ice but pure white-hot fire. He ripped her from the car, shoving her toward his own. "Mihai," he roared in Romanian. "Clean this up, now." He threw her into the passenger seat of his Aston Martin and sped away, his tires smoking. They got to the penthouse, and he slammed the doors, his rage a physical presence in the room. He was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so profound it was terrifying. He swept a priceless Ming vase off a table, and it shattered against the marble floor. "They touched you," he roared, packing like a caged tiger. "They tried to take you." Ava was crying, her body shaking from reaction. She had never been so scared in her life, but she was not scared of him. He stopped his packing. He saw her trembling. The rage vanished, replaced by a sudden raw fear. He came to her, his bloody hands hovering, shaking, afraid to touch her. "They put their hands on you," he whispered, his voice cracking. He cradled her face, his bloody hands smearing her cheeks, but he didn't seem to notice. "I did not know," he said, his voice broken. "I did not know what it was to fear." He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes squeezed shut. "Before you, I had nothing to lose. Nothing. Now you are everything." He kissed her, a desperate, raw, hungry kiss that tasted of blood and fear and a promise. "You are my soul, Ava, Suffletul Mew." He pulled her tight against him, his bloody hands staining her clothes. "And I will burn this city to the ground before I let anyone harm you." She clung to him, the smell of cordite and his blood filling her senses. She was not an outsider anymore. She was in the heart of the storm. Lucian's penthouse became a fortress. The floor-to-ceiling windows that had once offered a stunning view of Bucharest now seemed like a vulnerability, though Lucian assured her the glass was thick enough to stop a bullet. Ava was a guest, but she was also a prisoner. Lucian was consumed. The attack on her, on his woman in the middle of his city, was an act of war. He was on the phone constantly, his voice dropping to that low, lethal monotone she was coming to recognize. Captains and soldiers filtered in and out of the penthouse, their faces grim, their deference to him absolute. He was kind to her always. He would pause a war meeting to bring her a cup of coffee, his hand gentle on her hair. But he was distracted, his mind clearly on the streets below, on the rival family that had dared to touch what was his. He was torn. Ava could see it. He was torn between his primal need to lock her in this tower where he could keep her safe, and his strategic need to be on the street, leading his men hunting the Vladskis. He barely slept. He would sit in his office, the one behind the biometric scanner, for hours, staring at maps and screens, a glass of whiskey untouched by his side. Ava, on the other hand, was not built to be a damsel. She was not a passive, pretty thing to be kept. She was a curator. Her mind worked in patterns, in finding connections, in seeing the story behind the object. She was going stir-crazy. She started by bringing him food he wouldn't eat, coffee he let go cold, and she watched. "They are a snake with no head," he snarled one night, rubbing his eyes, the fatigue making him look almost human. "We hit one of their safe houses, we seize one of their shipments, and it does nothing. They are everywhere and nowhere. They are bleeding us 1,000 small cuts." Ava came to stand behind him, massaging his tense shoulders. Her eyes drifted to the screen. It was a complex web of shell companies, assets, and names. It was a financial map of the Vladsku family. And she recognized a name. "Argentum Arts," she said, her finger tapping the screen. "What?" Lucian asked, his voice rough. "This company, Argentum Arts, they were at the gala, they were aggressive. They tried to outbid the state for the new Brancusi exhibit. It was strange. They didn't seem to care about the art, just the acquisition." Lucian dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "It's a front, a way to wash money, they all do it." "No, wait," Ava said, her curator's mind clicking into place. She leaned over, her hair brushing his cheek, and scrolled down the list. "Look, this one, Danube Properties, and this one, Constanta Shipping. They're all different sectors, but look at this." She cross-referenced the names with a different file, one marked auctions. They all bid on the same 3 lots at the last Sotheby's auction in London. All of them. All Art Deco, all from the same pre-war collection. And this one, Danube Properties, they just bought that old warehouse by the port. The one that's been derelict for a decade. Lucian froze. His stillness was absolute. He slowly turned his head to look at her, his ice-blue eyes no longer tired but sharp, electric. "What are you saying, Ava?" "I'm saying, they're not just moving money," Ava said, her own excitement growing as the pieces fit. "They're moving goods. They're using the art world, my world, to smuggle. They're not just rivals, Lucian. They're building a new trade route. They're using priceless, protected art as a smokescreen to move whatever they want. This warehouse, this shipping lane, this auction house, it's a chain. You've been fighting their soldiers, but I think I just found their treasury and their highway." Lucian stared at her. The capo was gone. The lover was gone. In his place was a man in complete and total awe. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he reached up, tangled his hand in her hair, and pulled her down for a kiss. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of reverence. It was hard and deep, and it tasted like victory. "My queen," he whispered against her lips. "My Regina." He spun in his chair, all trace of fatigue gone. He grabbed his phone. His voice was no longer filled with rage. It was the cold, precise, happy voice of a surgeon who has just found the tumor. "Mihai," he said, "get the men, and get me Commissioner Popescu on the line. No, we are not fighting tonight. We are ending this." He didn't go in with guns. He went in with scalpels. He didn't send his soldiers to the Vladsku stronghold. He sent the police commissioner, who was, Ava now understood, very much on the Dragovic payroll. He sent customs officials, who were also, apparently, on his payroll. He didn't start a war. He executed a hostile takeover. He didn't just fight the Vladsku boss. He used Ava's information to seize his assets, to freeze his accounts, to intercept his most valuable shipments mid-transit. He didn't just kill the snake, he cut off its blood supply, its food, and its air. He left the Vladescu family with nothing but their guns and no money to pay the men who held them. It was a checkmate, a brilliant, bloodless, and absolutely final checkmate. He came back to the penthouse not at night, but in the bright light of morning. The sun was streaming over the Danube, flooding the marble floors with gold. He was not bloody. He was not raging. He was just tired and victorious. He had a long gash on his forearm from what he dismissed as a minor disagreement with a filing cabinet. He walked into the kitchen where Ava was waiting. She had a first aid kit. She said nothing. She just took his arm and began to clean the wound, the antiseptic stinging. The silence in the penthouse was different. It was not the tense, waiting silence of a fortress. It was the quiet, settled silence of a home. "It's over," he said, his voice rough. He watched her fingers as she expertly bandaged his arm. "Is it?" she asked, her voice quiet. She didn't look up. "They are. The Vladescus are gone. Their power, their roots there. Assets, they are. Ours." He put his other hand over hers, stilling her movements. She looked up. His ice-blue eyes were soft, unguarded in a way she had never seen. "I came to Bucharest to consolidate my father's empire. I thought it was about steel and shipping and other things." His thumb brushed her knuckles. "I did not know it was about finding this." "And what is this?" Ava whispered. She was no longer the curator. She was no longer a victim. She was the woman who had seen the map and understood it. She was his queen. "This is my world, Ava," he said, his voice a low, serious vow. "It is dark. It is dangerous. I cannot offer you a simple life. I cannot offer you peace." She finished the bandage and pressed her palm against his. Her hand was small against his, but her grip was firm. "I never liked simple, Lucian. And I've learned I don't need peace." She leaned in and kissed him, a slow, soft, and deliberate kiss. It was not a kiss of impulse or surrender or possession. It was a kiss of partnership. "I just need you." He pulled her into his lap, right there in the marble kitchen as the sun flooded the room. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in. He held her not like she was a fragile, precious thing to be protected, but like she was his other half, the part of him that made him whole, the part that made him better. He was the capo of Bucharest. He was the ruler of the shadows, but in this moment he was just a man holding the woman who was his soul. And it was enough. It was everything.